And for more on this game, we head out back to Eugene, Oregon, where we are standing with the host of the Josh Pate College Football Show, Josh Pate. And Josh Pate, this was pure cinema for 4 quarters, right? But what was not beautiful was the lack of clock management by Ohio State in those final few plays. When you look at what you saw there, who do you hold accountable at the end of the day? Because they had a really good shot to hit a game-winning field goal, and now they're going home with an L.
Yeah, I thought that whole sequence, it was weird how it played out, because when the drive started, it started with Howard kind of semi getting sacked, kind of fell down, and it set them back behind the chains. They convert the first down. It looks like they're off to the races. Believe they had a timeout in their back pocket. And then it kind of got discombobulated there. There were a couple of plays negative that got them behind the sticks again. And you keep on trying to play that stuff out in your mind. I know it's easy for us to sit there, even in the moment, much less after the fact, and say, man, this was mismanaged. They drill on this stuff so much, and you go through these scenarios and sequences so much. I have sat in these team meetings the Fridays before games with these teams, and they'll sit there and just drill staff-wise and with the team. Situations. Here's what we're going to do. We're telling you, the players, here's what we're going to do if this is the situation, if that's the situation. But there is no substitute for having about 60 or 65,000 folks at full throat and game on the line, and sometimes it goes that way. And so then you look at that, and then you play the what-if game, a million different what-ifs in this kind of game. We could talk about that the rest of the week. But I think the backdrop of all that, coaching, I'm not going to call it malpractice, but questionable decisions at the end there. The backdrop of not executing, the backdrop of a miss here, a make there is, I think definitively, I'm going to say I think we just saw the best 2 teams in the Big Ten. I think Penn State will have something to say about that, and they get Ohio State in their backyard in a couple of weeks. But the backdrop of it all is half-decent shot we see these teams play again, and who wouldn't sign up for that right now?
Look, I'd sign up for that every single day, 7 days a week. But when you look at Dan Lanning, first win, as Akima mentioned, over a top-5 program, and just the way Dylan Gabriel played, the defense was great. Well, the offense was great. The defense made enough plays down the stretch. How big of a win is this, not just for Dan Lanning, but for this program to say, look, we can hang with the big dogs like Ohio State?
I'm glad you said it the way you did. You didn't say top 5 team, you said top 5 program. And I don't know if you meant that intentionally, but that's exactly the way it should be said, because you have every now and then teams that crack the top 5 in college football that really are not top 5 programs. They're just having that given year. This is a top 5 program. Ohio State is a consensus top 5 program every year, regardless of whether they win this or win that. And I think the past few years they hadn't been able to get over that Michigan hump. This is the Michigan game for them this year. The Oregon game, maybe games, will be the Michigan test, more so than Michigan itself. And I think it was so big for Lanning. And it's not, I don't think internally, validation that what they're doing is right and the track they're on is right. They believe that. But you know as well as I do, you lose this game at home, and immediately the talk turns to, all right, you lost to DeBoer last year, and then you lost to him again in the Pac-12 championship game. He went to Bama, and now we're in the Big Ten, and you got them in your backyard. You had them against the ropes. Like, this is the best shot you have. This is your chance to put a stamp on Dan Lanning's Oregon program, and you let him off the hook. Well, you get to erase all that because you didn't let him off the hook. You ended up getting the job done, and it's such a game of inches. It's fractions of inches in some cases. But history remembers winners. They don't remember always how it happened. And Oregon out-executed them tonight. It's another thing that should be noted. It's not like a -4 turnover game. It's not one of those where, man, we beat them, but dang, they outgained us by 250 yards. They straight up beat Ohio State. I think also what they've been building towards here for quite a while is fighting against the theory that you cannot build from the inside out on the West Coast. There's a reason that's a theory. For a long time, it's been true. They're still learning that lesson down the coast at Southern Cal. Oregon's just the exception to the rule from the Rocky Mountains west right now about the fact that you can build like that. You got to recruit nationally to do it, but you can build like that, and you got to build like that because to get where you want to go, you're going to go through teams built like Ohio State or teams built like Georgia or teams built like, you know, Miami or Alabama, and this was a huge first test passed in what will probably be a series of tests this year for this team.
And speaking about that, last year we saw Washington and Oregon playing a classic game in the regular season, Washington winning that, and then they met again in the Pac-12 championship. This year, Oregon wins the big game in the regular season. Do you think, or how likely do you think it is that we see these 2 teams again in a Big Ten championship, and maybe we get another crazy result like we saw tonight?
I think this team will be there. I think Oregon will be there. Mathematically, I mean, that's the least bold statement anyone can make on this evening. The follow-up to that, what gets really fun here is Penn State won earlier today. So they're undefeated in conference play. And, I mean, there's just a giant red carpet that gets rolled out right now for a few weeks down the road for this Ohio State team, which will now be in desperation, sort of must-win back against the wall mode in conference play to go on the road to Happy Valley. Everyone knew they had two big road dates. They had this one, and they failed this one. They're going to have a trip to Penn State in a couple of weeks. And the thing about that is, man, Penn State's sitting here undefeated, and so I know that I think we just saw the two best teams in the Big Ten tonight. I think that. But you know what? If you go on the road and you get clipped in a really tough environment in their own right up in State College, then you may still make the playoff, but it's not you facing Oregon. In a rematch, it's Penn State and James Franklin, who may very well be there. So regardless of whether we think we saw the best two here tonight, schedule sometimes is going to dictate who makes it to that conference title game. And Ohio State's got to go on the road again in an environment that may almost be as tough as this one tonight. This was a world-class college football environment tonight.
I was going to say, watching it on TV, it was amazing, so I can only imagine what it was like in person. Josh Pate, we always appreciate the insight. One of the best in the biz, man. Take care.
Take care.
And make sure to check out the Josh Pate College Football Show Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube. He breaks it all down for you. Tremendous insight and knowledge.
CBS Sports HQ is built by the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Back here in studio with two-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden and CBS Sports college football writer Richard Johnson. B-Mac, what the heck happened in Eugene in the final 2 minutes? We had a pass interference on the offense on Jeremiah Smith. The rule is, as soon as the refs give the ready, the clock runs.
Yep.
It was as if Ohio State didn't know that. So they're sitting there, Will Howard sitting in the pocket, taking his time. There's 6 seconds on the clock.
Yeah.
Then we're running the football. What are we doing?
Well, first and foremost, the game was unbelievable, right? If you didn't have a dog in the race, you
I
could
had a
just
dog in the
watch
race.
it. Hakeem had a dog in the race. Me, myself, and Rich, we did not. So we really enjoyed this ball game from start to finish. So that's first and foremost. But to add to what you mentioned, Hakeem, when you look at the questionable situational moments, coaching errors, and that last drive for Ohio State, when you look at how smoothly they were getting things going, outside of that first sack where Will Howard fell, he slipped. Outside of that, they were moving down the football field in a manner in which they would eventually attempt a field goal. But when you talk about the coaching errors, a questionable OPI call, but then outside of that, you still had enough time, and you had one timeout in the holster.
And you still have to have the presence of mind, and you have to understand that it's an offensive foul. It happened inbounds. The clock is going to go on the officials ready. Those are the rules of the sport. And so when Ohio State acts like they have more time than they do, they lessen their margin to try to pull this comeback off, and that puts you in a situation where there's 10 seconds to go and then there's 6 seconds to go. You should have had more time anyway.
Yep.
And yes, as soon as Will Howard clutches that ball, double clutches that ball the first time, that ball's got to go. It's got to get out of the field of play. It's got to be spoiled, thrown away.
Yeah.
Because, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a field goal from the 40-yard line that's going to be 60-ish yards is a gimme. It's certainly not in college football. But you've got to give your team a fighting chance to win the ball game. And they didn't do that with how they managed, or should I say mismanage, the end-of-game situation there.
Well, and I'll even take you back. They had a fourth down stop inside the red zone on 4th and goal, and they punted in their next possession. Ohio State did. There were so many missed opportunities when you think about what the Buckeyes had in front of them. There was also 12 men on the field late in the game there. They got 5 yards. It was Ryan Day's looking at the players for Oregon on the field, but are you making sure you're telling your quarterback, hey, the time's running out here. You cannot run this football. Either throw it away or do something with it.
These are things that you have to emphasize as coaches, and sometimes coaches get caught up in the game just like we get caught up in the game as fans. The same can be said for players. There lies the window of error in those moments. Because as a coach, great point when you look at Ryan Day when he was yelling to the referees to have 12 men on the football field.
Yes.
Okay, that gave you an extra 5 yards. Now you have to go reiterate to your OC, also to your quarterback. Listen, These are our options right here. We have one timeout. This is the amount of time we have on the clock. These are our 3 options or our 2 options. Make sure we exercise one or the other. In that situation with Will Howard, and I know a lot of people might jump on Will and like, what are you doing? He has an internal clock in his head, but also he understands and knows I have no one open. I have no one open.
But I'll say this.
And I have to run, but you're trying to time your slide up where you have at least 2 seconds on the clock to be able to burn that final timeout.
But he didn't do that. That's the thing. You've got to have in his ear, you've got to tell him, hey, Will, if you're going to go down at maybe the 30, right? It's still a long field goal, but that saves us the time. The sin there, if there is one, is that he kept going, right? He tried to get 5 or 10 extra yards. And look, I know he's a battler, he's a competitor, he's an athlete. You don't want to just give up, but you have to have the presence of mind there because of the game situation.
Who are you going to blame on this? You blame Ryan Day?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the OPI and not having the offense ready to go, they lost about 8 to 9 seconds.
They did.
Yeah. That was scoring.
They should have been able to run another play.
And that last play with Will running the football, remember, it was 10 seconds on the clock that he basically squandered away. So if you had an extra 10 seconds along with a timeout, good, you got an opportunity to attempt the field goal. If you make it, that's one thing. But just having the opportunity, you got to give yourself a shot. They didn't even give themselves a shot.
Yeah, because the 12 men on the field cost him 4 seconds. They had 10, and then it went down to 6, and he slides, and there's not enough time left. There's not enough time left. In that situation, this was poor execution is what we see. We see that. Look, we see that at the college level. We see it at the NFL level. When you go back and you start to think, okay, where do we have the missed opportunities, BMAC? Where is it going to be outside of this final 2 minutes for Ohio State? We're going to go back and look at the film and go, man, we should have executed there. We should have been better there. Where are you looking at?
For me, I go back and watch what started the successful scoring drives for Oregon. Splash plays, taking shots down the football field. Dylan Gabriel was super accurate with his deep shots, but his wide receivers did a great job creating enough separation to have a pocket window for him to complete the passes. When we look at Ohio State's defensively, they've been stout against the opposing teams they played against. But they haven't played anybody. But one would think they would not allow the splash-like plays they allowed today when you look at some of the outstanding. We had a long wide receivers for Oregon, right? Stewart caught a long of 69. Taz caught a long of 48. Torrance caught a long of 32. These are things that you can't allow to happen. Splash plays. For us, splash plays are anything that are 25 yards or longer. They allowed 3 of them, and all 3 of them led to scoring opportunities for Oregon. You cannot do that because now you just generate more momentum for the opposing team, and you give the quarterback you're going against confidence. Think about this. Dylan Gabriel looked the best. He's looked the entire season in an Oregon uniform against the best team in Ohio State.
Yeah.
Denzel Burke is a tremendous defensive back. He got cooked today.
But remember,
he got flambéed, and it happens. It happens.
But remember, I want to take you back to that 4th and goal. Dan Lanning's going for it. Ohio State gets a red zone stop. Dylan Gabriel has a wide open receiver.
And he
tries to force it in there.
Yep. He missed it. He didn't even look at it. We were watching that play.
We're talking about a game of inches.
The play was designed for Taz.
Right.
Ran in motion.
Correct.
Wide open. Never looked his direction. 4 downs and out in favor of Ohio State.
But consider this. I love the way Dan Lanning calls a game. Usually when you get defensive head coaches, they're tight, right? They want to control everything and they want to have everything, under lock and key, and we'll let our defense win the game. That cannot be said about Dan Lanning. I mean, think of the amount of 4th downs that they went for. They stole a possession, BMAC, with a squib onside kick where the kicker just kicked it into the front line of the Ohio State return team.
I don't know if that was purposely done.
I think it was on purpose because
it was well executed.
I think it was on purpose because of this. You know, if you're Dan Lanning, that you're in this game in a high leverage spot against a great football team, you have to try everything to get an edgewise advantage to win the football game. And that's what Dan Lanning is able to do in these big games. Last year against Washington in Seattle, it bit them because they weren't able to execute on a few 50-50 chances. And everybody says, oh, well, you look dumb for going for it there and going for it there. Well, Dan Lanning looks pretty smart here for calling that onside kick. He looks pretty smart for the times they went for it on 4th down. They went for 2 where they tried to maximize and press. And they come out with a win here.
This is their first win against a top 2 team in program history. This is massive for Oregon. When you talk about what this this means for Dan Lanning, because they didn't really look great to start the season. They were messing around. You always like to say they're playing with their food.
They did.
It's kind of what they were doing.
Yep.
Here, this is a statement win against Ohio State at home.
Facts. And it's a statement win. But if you look at the struggles, how they started this ball game off, we saw a red zone interception by Dillon Gabriel. We saw a missed PA attempt. We saw another attempt squandered away. They still found a way to get the job done. So now when you look at the rest of their schedule there on your graphic, I mean, they're sitting in the driver's seat right now. Sitting in the driver's seat. You still have Illinois, who's playing really good football, but you get them at home.
Had to hang on to beat Purdue.
Yeah, you get them at home. You travel to Michigan. I mean, they're in the driver's seat. And I'll say this. I wouldn't be surprised, and this is what I expect to see, Ohio State and Oregon face off again in Indianapolis.
I'll take it twice. Heck, I'd take it 3 times in the college football playoff if that's what we get to. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
I'll remind you quickly, Dillon Gabriel was the preseason favorite to win the Heisman.
Yep.
He's back in the conversation now.
You really think so?
Why not? I'm not saying he's the first sentence in your conversation. He's in a conversation.
I don't know. It's a small conversation.
Okay, so like what?
A whisper on the side, huh?
Some
gossip.
There's not a lot of sentences in that conversation. Maybe 2.
What I'm trying to say here is the fact that he has put this team, he has played them back into contention. Not that they weren't before this game, but now when you go be number 2 in the country, that's a big deal. Like the fact that Alabama lost to Vanderbilt last week, they're coming off the win against Georgia. If they lost to Georgia and then they lose to South Carolina today, we're feeling a little bit different. They figure out a way to hang on there. But what I'm trying to say here is the fact that Dillon Gabriel has put them back in the forefront of saying, hey, maybe we're overlooking this team, B-Mac.
It's a stamp. It definitely is. It says that, like, yeah, we beat Boise close. And no, this is a stamp for them, I think. They got Michigan coming down the rest of the way, and BMAC, again, like you just said, they may see this Ohio State team again in Indianapolis.
I think the only thing that provided concerns for us with Oregon was their inability to dominate the teams they were supposed to dominate. And the untimely turnovers for your guy there, Dillon Gabriel. And another one surfaced again today, right? Red zone turnovers has been associated with him so far throughout his career there in Oregon. But if you go back to summertime, while we were all getting ready for college football, most fans of college football, most people who monitor the Big Ten felt like Oregon would be the first or the second best team in the Big Ten. And also, too, knowing that Oregon would get Ohio State at home.
We circled this for weeks.
We all felt like this was a prime opportunity for Oregon to have a signature win. Now, when the season started, struggling against Idaho, struggling against Boise, then you started to be like, oh, they're not the team that we thought they would be, and the quarterback is not playing up to the level. Tonight, they put everything together, put forth their best effort, and had a huge signature win for Dillon Gabriel as the quarterback for Oregon.
Much more ahead here on CBS Sports HQ as Oregon knocks off Ohio State at home. And for Ohio State, this is sort of a rinse and repeat. It is now 5 straight losses against an AP number 2 versus the AP number 3. So when they're number 2 and they're playing the AP number 3, look at this. The last win they've had in this instance was 2016 against Michigan. And now, well, they're looking at that. They're looking at that team now at the end of the season. Ohio State's going to have to pick themselves up after this loss on the road to the Oregon Ducks. By the way, Big Ten teams playing at opponents at least 2 time zones are a combined 1-9 in conference games now. Yeah,